All right, guys. So last week, if you guys weren't here, we started a series called Brand New because we have a brand new year, a brand new series. So it was simple enough. We just called the series Brand New. It's actually not. We were actually just really lazy about it. And we just decided to go with the name for the series because we stole this from another church. But that's all good. But what we're looking at, what we're going to go through, this is all about the way that the church should look like based on the way that Jesus told us it should look like. It's the way that God, that Jesus said, this is the mission, this is the way my church will be. And Brandon said last week, he warned you guys last week, this is a series that can easily bring up bad emotions. It can bring up harsh emotions, bad memories, because we're talking about some of the ways that as the church we're becoming resistible. And I know that there are people in this room who have been hurt by the church, who have been mistreated by the church, and who saw for themselves exactly how resistible the church can become when we don't follow that call to follow and be the church that Jesus has called us to be. So this series may make you really uncomfortable and may even make you upset. But it's important that we're working through this stuff. It's important that we're doing this together in a space where we can invite conversation, that we can open up conversation lines, talk about this, really dig into it, and really, kind of tear it down so that we can build it back up into something better. So I'm glad that we're doing this together as a church. So for those of you who weren't here last week, we got a little bit of catching up that we have to do with you. Got a little bit of catching up. So we have this series called Brand New. And the thing is, when Jesus arrived, when Jesus came to earth, he initiated a new movement, a brand new movement, something totally separate from what we have seen before. This is not Judaism 2.0. This is not old religion with a facelift. This is an entire separation from what was already known in the world. And it was a doing away of what we are calling the temple model. And what the temple model is it is basically all religions, every religion prior to Jesus. If you look at it, if you break it down, you can find the temple model in these religions. You can find it broken down into these things. And here's what it consists of. It consists of sacred men, and it's always men. It's always men that we put in these positions of high authority, positions of power, sacred men who work in sacred places that as followers, you have to go in order to worship, that you have to go in order to do sacrifice, that you have to go in order to do ritual. Sacred places in which these sacred men worked interpreting sacred texts, documents that were considered high, that were considered of value. They would interpret them. And they would interpret them and then inform sincere followers of exactly what it meant to follow, exactly what it meant to be religious. And they would do so in such a way that gave them an advantage. So you see this through all religions prior to Jesus. But Jesus came, and like we said, he launched something totally new. He said, no, it's not going to be that way. I'm going to initiate a new covenant, a new agreement between God and his people, between God and the Israelites, but then between God and all people, that all people were invited to this covenant. And he gives these people a new command, a singular command. And that's something we're going to be talking about all day today, is a singular command that God gave us. He says there's going to be a new ethic. There's going to be a new foundation. There's going to be something that marks our movement, marks our church, marks our congregation differently than what has marked congregations and groups and religions in the past. It is going to be a new ethic, a new center point. And he said then it's going to be a new movement altogether. And they use the church ecclesia. And ecclesia, like we said last week, is a Greek word that is terribly, horribly translated into the word church. Church is actually it's a German word that was forced into there because that's what they wanted in there, but it's really better translated as a gathering, a congregation, or a body of people. So he says this is going to be a new movement, totally different from what we've seen already. And it is the end of the temple model. He does not want the temple model anymore. He sees the way that it is broken. And because here's what happens in the temple model. Here's what happens. You see, there is a standard that is set that only the elite can meet. A standard is set that only these sacred men could meet. But Jesus says, no more of that. I'm setting a standard. I'm putting a bar that is so high that nobody could ever possibly meet it, that it's going to be impossible to get there. And what that's going to do is even the playing field. You're all on even terms now. You're all starting from the same place. See, the temple model requires followers to make peace with God. It forces them to go make a sacrifice, to go make a confession, to go do a ritual of some sort. But rather, Jesus says, go and make peace with your neighbor. Go to your neighbor. Go outward and see what you can do there. Because God can wait. God is fine. You guys are going to be okay. But you need to get right with your neighbor. Because people are going to mark. People are going to signify. The way we treat people are going to be the cornerstone now for our movement. In the temple model was always nation specific, that you had to go to a specific city, a specific temple, a specific mountain. You name the place. There was always a place that you had to go, a place that you had to be from in order to be a part of these religions and these movements. And Jesus says, we're done with that. It's for all nations, all people. Everybody is invited. You're invited. I'm invited. We are all invited. That you can be a follower right where you're at, on the ground on which you stand. And in fact, he says, if you are standing in the holiest place in the world, that there was something incredible happening, that you're sitting there marveling at the miracles that occurred in this place, the person to your left and the person to your right are more sacred than any of the dirt that you stand on. That his movement will be marked by people. By people. So he begins this totally new initiative, and in the first century, pagans and Gentiles begin to flock. They begin to join in groves because they realized the temple model and paganism never really worked out for them. They always seemed to come up short. They always seemed to never have enough. And Jewish people began following because this new religion was freeing. It was freeing. It was a totally new look on things. So it was attractive to people. And the Jewish people in the first century who were attracted to this movement, there was a specific tension that really they carried. A specific tension that made it hard for them to abandon the old, to let go of the old practices, and to really embrace fully the new stuff, and really embrace fully the new movement. Because it felt wrong to abandon like these traditions. Like they were raised with them. Like I'm sure you have things that you were raised with, things that like values and stuff that you were brought up with. And for them, it would have felt almost sacrilegious to let go of all those things, almost sacrilegious to move away from the things they've been taught, the understanding of religion. And this leads me to my next point, and this is a point that we're going to hit on way more next week, but it's important that we understand it as we move forward, that our consciences determine our religious realities, whether they reflect reality or not. Our consciences determine religious realities, whether they reflect reality or not. I'm sure we've all experienced this. Somebody comes up to you and tells you, oh, no, you shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way. Do this in marriage. It works really well. Works real well. Tell the other person how they should feel. You shouldn't feel that way. No. No, why would you feel that way? Or how about this one? You shouldn't feel guilty about that. Like, I don't understand. You didn't do anything wrong. Don't feel guilty about that. The great thing about these phrases is that every time you use them, every time somebody tells you you shouldn't feel guilty about something, immediately all of the guilt goes away. It's just, oh, I'm not guilty anymore at all. Wow, thank you so much for telling me that. No, it never works that way. Never, ever does the guilt just go away after that. In fact, maybe you feel more guilty afterwards. It's not that way. No, because our consciences are fine-tuned to a specific set of values that help us to understand what is right and what is wrong. And our religious experiences speak to those values. They help to fine-tune those values. And it doesn't just affect us. Even when somebody close to us, maybe a family member, maybe a close friend, even when somebody close to us does something that kind of rubs the wrong way against our values, it makes us uncomfortable. It makes us feel weird. So being raised Catholic, this is an example. Being raised Catholic, my Protestant friends were always confused about why I had to go to confession, about why confession was a part of my life. And I was like, what do you mean, why is it a part of my life? I want to be forgiven, don't you? Like, of course I'm going to go to confession. And they're like, why do you have to be late to, like, baseball games? Why do you have to be late to these events? Just because you're going to Mass? Because Mass is important. You're supposed to go to Mass. I don't understand what's so confusing to you, but they didn't understand it because it wasn't part of their religious realities. And so I snapped back. I countered back. I was like, your family doesn't drink at all. Why doesn't your family drink at all? And they're like, oh, well, it's wrong. Didn't you know it was wrong? And I'm like, no, what do you mean it's wrong? It's like, well, you're not supposed to. Like, that's it? You're just not supposed to? Yeah, that's it. Like, drinking is wrong. And I'm like, so your family doesn't drink anything at all? No. I'm like, we drink at church. We drink at church. Like, in fact, they actually promoted. They're like, yeah, come on, be a part of this. They hand it out. I'm like, there's this tension between the two of us then, that neither one of us understands the other person's religious realities, the other person's values, because we were bred in something And that is what informed our consciences. Our religious experience fine-tunes those values. And the Jewish people, as well as ourselves today, have this. We have that set of values that we're raised with. We have that set of values that we're brought up in, that we understand so well. And so what the Jewish people do, the Jewish Christians, is they try to take Jesus. They take Jesus and try to assimilate him into the temple model. They try to take Jesus and find a way to fit him in, because it is now Jesus plus the temple. It is Jesus plus something else. So we meet the Apostle Paul. We meet the Apostle Paul, and when we meet him, when he comes onto the pages of history, we meet him as Saul of Tarsus. And Saul of Tarsus was a Pharisee, but he wasn't just any old Pharisee. He was like the best Pharisee. He was like the top Pharisee. He knew what he was doing. He could out-Pharisee all of the other Pharisees. Like, he was the best. And so when he sees Jesus come onto the scene, when he sees Jesus start to shake things up and do something different, he's like, God, you and I, we're on the same page. I know it. He's a fool. He's an idiot. I'm going to take care of him for you. You and I, we got this. I'm going to take care of it. And Saul sets out to destroy the Jesus movement, sets out to destroy this new church. And he would have done it because Paul is very type A. Very type A. He knows how to set goals, make lists, get his stuff done, get it done in a timely order, but Jesus gets to him. You can read in Acts. You can read Acts, the amazing conversion of Saul of Tarsus to be the Apostle Paul, in the way that Jesus doesn't just transform him, doesn't just convert him, but puts him on fire for the message of Jesus. So much so that the large majority of the New Testament comes from the Apostle Paul. So he becomes a follower, and when he becomes a follower, and when he begins to learn what it means to be a part of the Jesus movement, he realizes that merging the old way, merging the temple model, and the new way, the Jesus way, is never going to work. It's never going to work. And in fact, it's going to be dangerous to the message of Jesus. So if it's not clear already, the temple model and Jesus' way are different. They're different. But if that's the case, then we need to understand, we need to answer the question, if Jesus is not part of the temple model, then what does the new way look like? What does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? Big question. But what does it mean specifically in regards to not being a part of the temple model? What is going to be the thing that signifies, that makes people look at Christians differently, that makes us as a church less resistible? And so Paul is going to help us answer this question in the book of Galatians. So Paul does a bunch of missionary journeys. And one of the places he goes is Galatia. Galatia is a province that would be in modern day Turkey. And when he goes there, he plants several small ecclesias, several small bodies of people, several small churches, maybe kind of like ourselves. And when he leaves Galatia, he leaves the Galatian people in a healthy church, in an understanding of who Jesus is and what the movement really means. But once he leaves, another missionary group comes in afterwards. And it's a missionary group full of Jewish Christians, people who converted from Judaism. And they tell the people of Galatia, listen, Paul's great. He's great. We love him and everything. But he didn't tell you everything. He missed some details. We're going to inform you on those details. We're going to let you know about those details. I learned something new this week, too. I learned a new word, which is weird because if you scroll through the internet for any amount of time, you'll find out that being a millennial, I'm not supposed to learn new things. I'm just supposed to watch the world burn. I'm supposed to do everything in my power to make the world worse. That's what I found out when I scrolled through the internet about millennials. But here I am, I decided to learn a new word. And the new word is so much fun. It is so much fun to say. It is apoplectic. Apoplectic. Say it with me, apoplectic, apoplectic. I'm going to say it so many times that you guys are going to go home and it's going to be stuck in your heads and you're going to be saying it all day, but I should probably tell you what it means before that because it's not something you want to say in every sentence. Apoplectic means overcome with anger, extremely indignant. Overcome with anger, extremely indignant, apoplectic. See, right in there is the word pop. And the way I know that Paul is frustrated with these Jewish Christians is because when he finds out about this, he just about pops off on them. He gets really, really upset with them. And we discover just how big of a deal it is when he writes the book of Galatians, when he calls them out on this stuff. So when Paul writes this letter, just to show you how apoplectic he got, we're going to go through verse by verse. The beginning of Galatians 5. We're going to go through verse by verse, and you're going to see the intense language that he talks about. So in this letter, we say he's referencing these Jewish Christians. Well, these Jewish Christians had a name. They were called Judaizers. Judaizers, and the Judaizers were Jewish Christians who believed that Gentiles must convert to Judaism in order to join the Jesus movement, that there was a step for Gentiles in between Gentile and Christian. Gentile and Jesus follower. It's the Jewish step. And there was a logical line of thinking behind it for them. It's okay, Jesus was the Messiah. Because Jesus was the Messiah, he fulfilled the Old Testament law and the Old Testament prophecies. So if Jesus is the Messiah fulfills the Old Testament prophecies, then Jesus is an extension of Judaism. And on top of all of that, Jesus was Jewish. Therefore, it makes sense. You need to be Jewish first because Jesus was Jewish first, right? But the thing is, becoming Jewish wasn't that simple. It wasn't like a, boom, 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 1, 2, 3, all right, you're in, cool. No, it means travel. It means a lot of things. There were a lot of steps into becoming Jewish, especially for somebody who was not from Jerusalem, who was not from that country. And in fact, for men, it even required a little bit of surgery. And they probably weren't too excited about, but they're like, he died for you. You can have a little surgery for him. And so when Paul discovers these guys come in to teach, he becomes angry. He becomes apoplectic because he knew the dangers of the temple model. He knew the dangers of merging the old with the new. He knew that teaching this would have diluted, denuded, and polluted the Jesus message. Diluted, denuded, and polluted. 3 rhyming words. Pastors always rhyme. I've met my rhyming quota for the day. Don't ask for it anymore. So let's walk through this. Let's walk through the intense language. And you need to experience this. You need to understand this truth before we move on. Because next week, you're going to be like, I'm not really sure about this church. I don't know. There's stuff, they might be off the rocker. And by the week after that, by week 4 of this series, you're going to be like, honey, grab the kids, get them up here. We got to leave because it's a cult. Like they're off their rocker. They have no clue what they're talking about. It's a big deal, though. This is a big deal because this becomes a cornerstone. Becomes foundational on the Christian faith. So Paul starts Galatians 5, verse 1. It is for freedom. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. You need to stop at that word freedom. You stop at that word free. And understand this, if your version of Christianity does not involve freedom, does not involve a sense of freedom, you have the wrong version of Christianity. You're doing it wrong. There is a sense of freedom that comes along with being a Christian. He continues, says, stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Do not let yourselves be enslaved to what we knew before, but become free because Christ has come to free you. Mark my words. I want you to look at that. At the end of that, there's an exclamation point. It doesn't seem weird to us, but in the Greek language, there was no such thing as punctuation. In the Greek language, translated to English, all sentences would just end in period or question mark. But they saw his language was so intense that the only way to get this message across was to add an exclamation point. Apoplectic. He's mad. He says, I, Paul, tell you, mark my words, I, Paul, tell you that if you let yourselves be circumcised, Christ will be of no value to you at all. No value to you at all. Got to stop on the word circumcision for a second. I know it's uncomfortable. We're going to talk about it a lot today. Sorry. Paul wasn't like some kind of anti-circumcision patriot. He wasn't like, oh no, we can never do this again. This is terrible. Because Paul was Jewish. He would have been circumcised. And all of Jesus' original followers were Jewish. So they would have been circumcised. Many people today are still circumcised. In fact, anybody who's circumcised, no, don't do that. He's not like this weird anti-circumcision patriot, but rather he's worried about what it represents. Because that practice, I thought about letting that hang for a second, but I was like, no, we got to get past that. I don't want somebody to make the mistake. It represented the old covenant. It represented the old message and the old covenant. And what Paul is saying is if you're trying to push the old covenant into the Jesus movement, you've forgotten. He initiated a new covenant at the Last Supper, a new way of understanding God's relationship to his people, God's relationship to the people who call him Lord and Savior. So if you allow yourself to be circumcised, you're embracing the old covenant, and you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. That's an extra step in the way of you getting to Jesus. So again, I declare to every man who lets himself be circumcised that he is obligated to obey the whole law. The whole law, and that's a lot of work. Judaizers are like, Paul, what's the big deal? A little bit of old, a little bit of temple model, a little bit of new. Everybody's happy. Come on. Why can't we just mix the two up a little bit? And Paul says, you want the benefits of the old law? You want the benefits of the old covenant? You want to follow that road? You want to go down that road? You realize that if before you followed half of it, you would be mad. People would be mad at those people. And people would tell those followers that are doing it halfway, no, you are so far apart from God. You have no clue what you're supposed to be doing. How are you doing it halfway, you hypocrite? That's how they would be called out. But if you want that, if you want the old covenant, if you want this to be of value, if you want this to be a step in between you and Jesus, then there are 630 some laws that come along with that. Are you ready to do that? Because Paul says this, you who are trying to be justified by the law have been alienated, pushed away, separated. You have departed from Christ. And that's pretty intense. It's pretty harsh. But then he says that you have fallen away from grace. That if you make this important, you have fallen away from the gift of grace. Let me put it to you this way. Say you really appreciate the church, the work that Becca, my wife, that Becca and I are doing with the church and the way that we're investing in the ministry, and you say, man, we really want to give them something to show our appreciation. So you come up to me after service and you're like, hey, we love you guys, we love what you're doing, so we're going to give you a $100 gift card to an unnamed restaurant. We're unnaming the restaurant on purpose. We're going to give you a $100 gift card to an unnamed restaurant. And I'm like, no, don't do that. I love my job. I love what I do. I love everything about One Church. Please, here, just let me pay you for the gift card. Let me pay you for the gift card. And I try to pull out $100, which I never have on me anyways, but the metaphor. I pull out $100 to give to you, and you're like, no, it's a gift. I'm like, okay, what about $50? What if I give you $50 for the gift card? You're like, no, come on, it's a gift. I was like, okay, fine, $25. $25, last offer. And you stop, and you're like, okay, $25. So you give me the $100 gift card, and I give you $25. Here's the issue. This gift card is no longer a gift card. It is a discount card. It is a discount card. You have taken the gift out of the card. Grace. Grace is the hallmark. Grace is the hallmark of the Jesus movement. Grace is the hallmark of what Jesus came to do for you. Grace is God knew everything about you and chose to love you anyways. Grace is God refuses not to call you his child and not to call us his children, because grace is unearnable. And the second that you start bargaining, and the second that you start trying to earn it, the second it becomes, God, look what I did. Look at all the stuff that I avoided. Ooh, look at the thing I did over here. God, I'm planning on doing this thing next. The second it becomes that, the second you try to offer something to God that is worthy of his grace, the second that you say you've met the standard, you take the gift out of grace. You take the gift out of grace. Oh, that's extreme, Paul. That's harsh. What do you mean I'm alienated? It's just one little thing. Why are you so mad about this? And the crazy part is, this isn't the extreme part. This isn't the intense part. This isn't the part that proves how apoplectic Paul was. He says, for in Christ, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value. He doesn't care. That's not the point, because he's about to give you the point. He's about to tell you the point, because the next thing he says is monumental to our faith. The next thing he says ups the ante. And if you're tied to that old tradition, if you're tied to some of the old thinking, if you're tied a little bit to temple model thinking, this next thing is going to be uncomfortable for you. And I'm okay with that. Because if I preached the best sermon ever, had all kinds of modern metaphors and great ways of communicating this, if I preached this incredible sermon on this next verse and never showed you that it was written in the Bible, you'd think I might have gone a little nuts. You think I might have not studied this or done anything with this at all. And if you've tuned me out at this point, I get it. We all have those Sundays. We're just not there. But if you've tuned me out, I need you to just give me 3 minutes. Give me the next 3 minutes, because if you've tuned me out, this next thing may be the reason that you resisted church. It's especially if you aren't a church person or weren't a church person. It may be the reason that you resisted church and that you resisted Christians. Maybe the reason that you pushed back on people. And in fact, it's the thing that oftentimes makes the church most resistible. And oftentimes the thing that the church should be resisting most is the thing that makes us the most resistible. Galatians 5:6. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Paul, have you held a Bible recently? Things like that thick. The only thing that counts? Yep, the only thing that counts. So you're saying it's like one amongst many of it? Nope. Okay, so it's like top 10. Nope. How many things count, Paul? One. One thing. One command. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. The temple model is faith expressing itself this way. Is faith expressing itself about how close can I get to God? About what do I need in order to earn my faith? It's God. Hey, God, look at this thing I did over here. Look at this thing I avoided. Look at the sin that I'm not doing. Don't look at this thing over here. I did that. We don't want to talk about that. But God, look at all the things that I'm doing. Look at all the ways that I'm earning my faith. The temple model is entirely vertically focused. It's trying to figure out if you and God are okay. And if you're a Christian, if you've said, I believe that Jesus came to die for my sins, I believe that the things that Jesus say are true, I believe that Jesus offers me a free gift of grace. He's trying to tell you, stop worrying about it. Just shut up already. We're fine. We're fine. If somebody is willing to die for you, if somebody is willing to go to a cross for you and die for you, you don't have to worry about how you are. You don't have to worry about if you're okay. You don't have to go to bed at night wondering if you and God are good. You're fine. Stop worrying about the vertical, because this is not the only thing that matters. This is not just faith expressing itself through love. It's how you treat other people. So let's stop worrying about this and start worrying about this a little bit. Start worrying about reaching out to people. Start worrying about using our faith to get outward, to reach people, to love people. Because I think that's one of the things we're missing most, is figuring out how to love people again. If you're stuck in the vertical, that's temple thinking. That's temple model. Jesus said, we're done with that. We're done with that. If you say that I'm your Lord and Savior, we're good. The day is over. Believe in me and we're fine. Start looking outward. He tells the Galatians, you were running a good race. You were doing great, guys. So who cut in on you? Who stepped in and kept you from obeying the truth? And he says this, he says, a little yeast, just a pinch of yeast, works its way through the whole batch of dough. Don't think about that because it's disgusting. A single cell fungus that we put in our bread works its way through the whole bread. That's gross. So don't think about that. But it works its way through. A pinch of the temple model, a dabble of legalism, a smidgen of how am I doing? God, are we okay? And it'll work its way through the whole message. It will dilute, denude, and pollute the whole message of Jesus. The whole thing changes because it only takes a small dose of the wrong thing to corrupt the whole thing. Only takes a small dose of the wrong thing to corrupt the whole thing. And at this point, like, Paul, just take a breath. So what? Okay, we're different kinds of Christians. We do it a little bit of a different way. We have a little bit of a different interpretation of the text. Why is it such a big deal? It's okay to be different Christians. It's okay to interpret the text a little bit differently, but it's not okay to miss the main point. It's not okay to miss the reason Jesus came. It's not okay to miss the main message of Jesus. You want to practice it a little bit differently, fine, but don't miss that he did away with this and he wants us to start doing this. Don't miss that he offers you a free gift of grace, because the apostle knew where this would lead. The apostle knew what this would do. And if you want to know how apoplectic he got, you have to get to the next part. And if you haven't sent your kids down to One Kids yet, or you're at home and you haven't sent them to go play somewhere else, now's the time to cover their ears, because this is the rated R part. This is the rated R part. He says, as for those agitators, I wish they would go the whole way. I wish they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves. You should read the Bible. It's in there. Like that's word for word. That's in the Bible. Paul says that. Just go the whole way. If you're going to start cutting, just chop it off. Goodness. If you're going to start putting in the temple model, just go the whole way. Just do the whole thing because you're going to ruin it anyways. Because Paul was front and center for the temple model. He saw it. He saw the way that it corrupted leaders and enslaved people. He saw the way that it twisted leaders' minds, that it twisted their interpretation of everything and enslaved people, and it was such a big deal. He's saying if you want to incorporate that self, I hope you hurt yourself. I hope you get hurt, because maybe then it'll get through to you that Jesus did away with this for a reason. He knew this. Paul knew that sacred men would become self-righteous. They would interpret the text to give a standard that they could live up to. And when you tried to live up to it, it would be, oh, sorry it didn't work out for you. Sorry you didn't do it right. Sorry you didn't quite meet up. But, if you come to me, you give enough money, come to me, you do the right confession, practice the right ritual, come to the right place, come to me, I can make you right with God. I can make you right with God because I have met the standard. Because I tell you what the standard is. And if I'm not right with God, I can't tell you that, because then you'll take all the power away from me. He knew that sacred men would become self-righteous and worry more about self-preservation than people. He knew that then in turn makes sincere followers hypocrites. Because if sincere followers can't live up to the standard that some people can meet up to, then all of a sudden they're not actually doing it right. So they have to water down the rules so much. They have to dumb it down so much that their consciences can live with how they're living. That their consciences aren't bothered by the actual standard. And Jesus said, you've heard it said before, don't commit adultery. Okay, good on that. But I say if you look at a woman with lust, you have committed adultery. Uh-oh. Jesus said, you heard it said, don't commit murder. We haven't committed murder. We're doing pretty good on that. But I say if you hate your brother, you're guilty of murder. That's a standard that nobody can live up to, guys. And so we have to water it down. We have to make it easier. And the second we make it easier, then other people say, but aren't you supposed to be doing this? Aren't you supposed to be living up to this standard? Why doesn't it look like the way you said it was supposed to look like? Because the temple model makes the standard low enough that some people can achieve it. And Paul knew that the sacred texts would be manipulated, that the sacred text would be twisted and turned, and they would go, oh, you're coming to me? Oh, no, you didn't do that right because it says right here, and it says right here, and it says right here. And all of a sudden, the message of Jesus gets just transformed into something totally that's not supposed to be. And the ultimate result of the temple model, the one thing that Paul knew we needed to avoid most, is that people would be mistreated. Have you ever been mistreated by a church? You ever have a church put rules over love? Put commands over trying to get you to Jesus' feet? Over trying to bring you in and show you that God still loves you? So when you do that, it's so easy. It's so easy to miss the main thing. When you start putting steps in between where you are at in Jesus. Because Jesus came to remove all those steps. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free. There's that free word again. You were called to be free. Jesus came to make you free, but don't use your freedom then to indulge the flesh. Don't use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. Our faith gives us freedom, the freedom to love one another, not the freedom to go fill up our sin bucket just so that we can dump it out once a week. It's freedom to love and serve one another. And if you're worried that only having one command, that you have this thick Bible, but it all is contained by this one command, if you're worried that that's going to make things too easy, if you're worried that's going to make things too willy-nilly, too loose, then you don't understand the main thing. You don't understand the main thing. Because Paul says for the entire law, for the whole thing, all 10 commandments, everything, all 630 laws that are in the Old Testament that we've been trying to push on you, all of the things that Bible teaches us, Genesis to Revelation, the whole thick Bible is fulfilled in keeping this one command, the only thing that matters: love your neighbor as yourself. And you've heard it before, and it seems simple, yet we still miss it. And Paul's frustrated with the Judaizers because he's like, you, my Jewish brothers and sisters, we had the answer the whole time. It's in Leviticus. It's in the beginning of our text. I memorized this such a long time ago. Love your neighbor as yourself. We had it the whole time, but we never let it flourish and explode throughout our movement and throughout our faith and throughout the way that we treat people. Because this one thing informs all of the rest of the things. It's kind of like how The Wizard of Oz could have been 12 minutes long. It's like a 2.5-hour movie. Do I have that right? Like, it's really long. Like, cause like what happens is like there's like a tornado, there's a twister, and Dorothy gets caught up in it. It's like, Manny, Dorothy. Somehow she ends up in Oz, and all of a sudden things come into color. And by the way, nothing in the world was color until she got to Oz. Then all of a sudden, everybody saw it in color all the time. I heard it was great. It wasn't there. So she ends up in Oz, and she sees all these fun colors and these fun people running around. And somehow she gets these red slippers on her feet. Pause. Right there. Click your heels 3 times. You're home. We're in and out, 12 minutes, no commercials. End of the movie. She had the answer the whole time. Paul is saying, you had the answer the whole time, but we decided to keep adding things. We decided to make it harder. We decided to put barriers between us and Jesus. We decided that faith no longer made us free, but there was stuff in between. There's stuff in between. Guys, stop trying to assimilate the temple model. Stop trying to assimilate these barriers into our understanding of who Jesus is. Because one thing matters, one command matters, only one thing. One thing. And our one thing for today is easy. It's simple. Love God, love people. That's it. Love God, love people. Just love God and love people. Say that. Love God, love people. That's it. There's nothing else. Everything else is details. This one thing informs everything else. And I don't know why we keep missing it. Because if we get this right, if we start loving people, then you don't have to worry about this anymore. You don't have to worry about how you're doing with God. You're fine. You're fine. Because you already said, God, you want to give me grace? You came to die so that I could have grace. You came to die so that we could be fine. I accept that. I get it. So let's just be fine. I want that. That's freedom. That's freedom to love other people. That's freedom to reach out. Are you and your neighbor fine? Are you and your family fine? Are you and the people around you that you love fine? Because God's saying, get that right, and you'll know how we are here. Get that right, and we know how you, and it's hard. Guys, it's hard. But what's not hard is remembering the only command God wants us to follow. Love God, love people. Love God, love people, because the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love, is the faith that has freed you to love other people, that opportunity is taken advantage of. Only thing that matters. Because when we get this right, our religious experience is transformed. And when our religious experience is transformed, our consciences become fine-tuned to a new set of values, a set of values that Jesus has asked us to follow, a set of values that Jesus has said, be freed, love people. You want to know what God's will is for your life? Love God, love people. Love God, love people. Figure out how that fits in. Figure out how that fits in. God's not trying to hide his will for your life. He's not trying to deceive you with it. He's trying to give it to you right there. Love God, love people. So let's just try it for a week. Can we do that? 1 week. Then from there, we'll move on. Then from there, we'll keep trying it. From there, we'll see how it goes. And we'll try to see how we can do it better, because it's the only thing that matters. Is to love God and love people. So for this week, ask yourself this. Every time you come to a decision, every time you come to a place where you could do something, ask yourself, what does love require of me? What does love require of me? In this decision, in this moment, what does love require from me? Your religious experience will be transformed. You'll pray different. And we as a church we'll stop mistreating people. And we'll start loving people a heck of a lot better. So this whole week, I don't want you to pray this. I want you to think this. I want you to speak it out loud, and then I want you to act on it. What does love require of me? One thing. There's one thing. Paul was apoplectic because he knew we missed one thing, and we got to get back to it. Love God, love people. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Love God, love people, and the way that you love God is by loving people. Pray with me. God, we thank you so much for Paul. We thank you so much for what it is he has done. We thank you so much for the way in which he gave us this message. We thank you for the fact that he gave us this message, that he found it important enough to teach the people in Galatia this, so that we could learn it ourselves, so that we could just re-put it in to our faith and what it means to be a Christian, and what it means to have a faith in you, and what it means to love you. So thank you for your movement. Thank you for this brand new thing. So God, help us this week to love you by loving people, to love you by getting right with our neighbors, and to love you by looking outwards instead of looking upwards constantly. Thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for being the God that we do not deserve. I pray all of this in your most wonderful name, the name of Jesus. Amen.